Hello there and welcome to this vlog of November 2022, and today's video is going to be about the top 10 Trashfire mechs in BattleTech, which I'm sure is not going to be controversial at all. Before I get into this though, and I always do this if I do like top 10, top 5 lists or whatever, just going to go through a couple of significant points because when you're doing like a ranking system like this, it's especially in BattleTech, it's really important to know that what somebody considers a bad mech because of design faults or whatever might actually really work in a certain scenario or for a specific tactic. And I think sometimes when we talk about like bad mechs, it's really important to keep that in mind. So, like for instance, a mech might be just god awful at 3 or 4 things, but that one thing that it does can just really kind of play into the tactic that you're utilizing on tabletop. So really important I make that point first up. And obviously in BattleTech, like the mechs are purposefully designed to be bad or not. You know, some are better than others obviously, but you know, a mech might be designed for instance with an amazing weapon system, but that weapon system just like overcharges it for heat or overheats it so badly it can never really use it. The gaming system specifically bakes that in so that it's then up for the player to manage and get around that within, like, you know, the meta of the game and things like that. So there are, again, I say Trashfire mechs, that's a little bit clickbaity to be honest, because I think in certain eras as well, there's no such thing as a bad mech. If you're playing like in the Succession Wars, mechs are generally quite rare if you're playing like a narrative game. So just having a lance of mechs is good. That kind of brings me into the first point here, which is era specific. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's say for instance, if you've got a Succession War mech that was, you know, designed in and around like the third Succession War, that mech up against a clan mech is going to be like a lamb to the slaughter. So obviously I'm not, you know, these are not in reference to I don't know, like a 55-ton Succession War era Griffin or something like that. He's going to really struggle against any clan mech in 3050. Because the Griffin's obviously got all its weaponry on like the right side, which is a bit of a design flaw, or a big design flaw. It doesn't really have, even though it's got an LRM-10 and a PPC, that still like fails in comparison to the range of most clan mechs, so it doesn't even have that as an advantage. It's not going to be as fast as most clan mechs because it doesn't have as good an engine. So, you know, like, and that's why the initial days of the clan invasion, the Inner Sphere just got absolutely tanked because they just could not cope with that like increase in technology. But then obviously over time they retrofitted a lot of the mechs and came up with better designs and salvaged a lot of the, you know, the great systems that the mechs that the clans were using, incorporated them, and then they kind of get up to parity then with the clans. So era specific is a very important thing here. So any mech that I'm going to talk about is really kind of depends what era that mech comes around. And there are clan mechs on this list as well. Obviously, that's you know, for me, kind of the clan experience exists after 3050. I don't think I've ever played like a clan on clan engagement pre 3050, but for some, they'll like doing that. So, like in that case, some of these mechs that I'm going to show on here might have had an advantage at that time for a specific reason that I'm either not aware of or I don't care about because I'm not a big clan player. But you know, generally speaking, when I'm talking about era like specific here, it's purely in regards to I am not judging a Succession War mech against you know, a nouveau tech mech from the 3060s or something like that. That would be completely unfair. Second point there is what I'm going to be judging on. This is really obvious. So you've got armor, heat management, engine, which is basically speed of the mech. Engine as well, I suppose, encompasses like jump jets. Probably would have been better putting mobility there, but whatever. Weapon loadout, and then design issues. Design issues are little things like ammo, how much ammo is on a mech, where the placement of certain things are within the slots. So, like for instance, if a mech has nothing on the side torsos, that can be really problematic because those crits will seek into the center torso, which can be devastating for mechs because that's where all the gyro and the engine is housed usually. Third up there, we've got this is purely for classic tabletop. I've got my top 10 list, of course, using the flex sheets because I love the flex sheets. So we'll get into those in a second. So this is about classic BattleTech, not judged on Alpha Strike or on the looks of the mechs, because on this list there are some mechs on here that I really, really like and appreciate how they look, but that's got nothing to do. It's purely in regards to how I would judge something on tabletop, and it's kind of core performance. Again, just going back to that point that I made right at the start, there is no such thing really as a bad mech. Like, if you can use it to do something, like maybe hold objectives or getting to do physical combat in certain circumstances, you still get the advantages of a lot of like mechy things, but the designs on it might be so bad they deserve placement on this table. Final point, I will be discussing battle value in this as well. Battle value is, if you're talking about bad mechs, then battle value is quite an interesting one, because you can get mechs that are really badly designed but are really cheap and can give you really kind of a decent option just to kind of fill places up. So there might be certain instances where I'll talk about the positives of these mechs. In fact, on most of them, in terms of some good things they have. Maybe they are cheap, or maybe, you know, you can like put them in a lance with all four of these mechs and they can be really dangerous in that situation. So yeah, I'll go through that as we go through the list anyway. So let's start. So who do we have at number 10 then? Well, it's a clan mech, and it is the Hunchback 2C. The Hunchback 2C, and now the reason it's at 10 is because the damage dealing potential of this mech is probably as high as any mech in the game. It's absolutely insane. It's a 50-ton mech as well, so it's only a medium mech. So let's do the weapons first, because that's the real strength of this mech. 2 UAC 20s, that's a potential of 80 damage. That's insane. And 2 ERM lasers, which are both really, really good weapons in their own right as well. That's where the good things end on this mech, because everything else is pretty horrific. I'd say that mobility is actually pretty good. It's a 464, so that's actually not too bad. But for the jump jets and the crazy weapon loadout that this has got, it then literally has to sacrifice every other component on the mech. So armour, absolute garbage for a 50-ton mech, especially a mech that you're going to be using as a tank. 12 points of armour on the side torsos is horrific. I mean, that's where the UAC 20s are housed. So, look how big those UAC 20s are. It occupies, 8 out of 12 of the slots there. So you've got like 2 in 3 chance of destroying that if you do a crit. The other options aren't great either. That's obviously an XL engine hit or the ammo hit, which will obviously just blow the mech up. So, it's got case, so it'll tear off half the mech. And if you're playing force withdrawal rules, then the mech will be forced to basically leave the field. But the lack of armour there is just massively like horrendous to how this mech wants to operate. It's obviously a mech that you're going to have to try and get into close range. You can see there with the UAC 20, which has actually got pretty decent range, better than like a regular AC 20, so it's a 4.812. But again, if you are going to be trying to get into range, you're probably going to be running. So you're going to be taking pretty bad modifiers. You're then going to have to get in, at least 8 inches to do or 8 hexes, whatever, to do a medium range shot. So that's another +2. So it's all good having these amazing like AC or UAC weapons on there, but can they even do any damage? I mean, every time I've played a Hunchback. Sorry, my chair is very squeaky today. Sorry if that's picking it up. I've played the Hunchback 2C a few times on tabletop, and I don't think I've ever really had any success with it. It's just a complete glass cannon. That ties in as well to its heat management, because it's got 24 heat sinking abilities, so 12 double heat sinks. That's a problem though, really. I mean, when you kind of look at the weapon loadouts, because it looks straight away like it's actually got 24 points of heat there. But remember, when you're firing with a UAC weapon, you do double heat if you do a double shot. So that will give you straight away far more heat than you can manage, because you can only sink 24. So you probably are going to have to either do single shots, or you're going to have to, just do one UAC and then, go in with the ERM lasers, or drop the ERM lasers, however you want to do it. That's not great though. Like, especially like on the UAC, obviously to get the cluster hit, so to get 2 shells hitting, you're going to need an 8+. If you hit your opponent, so even scoring with a UAC hit doesn't mean you'll get like the full damage point. So to get the full 80 points of damage from those 2 UAC 20s is really quite unlikely. It's also like, in terms of its ammo, it's a little bit, I'd say, not under ammo, but if you are going to be going in at dual AC shots, that will expend 2 UAC shells per turn. So you've got 10 shots. So not the greatest, really. Although saying that, it's probably not too bad, because for the first probably 3 turns, you won't be able to shoot with it anyway, because you won't be close enough to the opponent. So yeah, it could work, I suppose, that, and you don't have to like double tap every time. But I think just the major design flaws with this are just incredible. I mean, to be fair, it really fits to the lore. Because the reason the clans invented this mech was it's a mech that they kind of put old mech warriors in as like a one last hurrah. So if you can do damage with it, you will absolutely bring devastation to your opponent if you can get up close and do it. But the chances are they're going to pick you apart from range, either explode your UAC weapons before you can get in there to do damage because of the paper thin armor, or worse still, get an ammo shot in there and tear half of the mech off. So yeah, it's not a good mech basically, but it's a fun mech, and that's something to emphasize here, that the fun of playing like pretty derpy mechs is great in BattleTech. Like, it gives you such a charm and it creates such a narrative in the game. So this list is like a reference list to these mechs. It's not me like just saying horrible things about them. I would advise you play with all these mechs, and if you get good at playing with them, you'll become a much better player, because some of them have got extraordinarily terrible weaknesses. Anyway, that's number 10. At number 10 as well, because of that damage. I mean, I couldn't put this mech any farther up the table, really, on the grounds that this mech can potentially destroy any mech in the game with that UAC double 20. So yeah, that's why it's at number 10. Next up, we have got the Charger, the CGR Mark 1A1. This is the very famous Charger, which I'm not going to bury as much as people probably think, because I do think there is a benefit to this mech to some degrees. That reminds me, I've just seen something I want to talk about with the Hunchback. I'll just go back for a second. I just wanted to talk about battle value. The battle value of this mech is 1679. That's extraordinarily expensive for a glass cannon. So again, you don't take any benefit there, but anyway. Moving on, I'll talk about the battle value now. I'll try to remember on every mech. Back to the Charger though. I'll deal with battle value first, since I just brought it up. So this is an incredible battle value at 981. So it's under 1,000 battle value for an assault mech, which is really, really nice. I mean, I don't think you find that many under 1,000, if any. This might be the only one. So yeah, 80-ton mech, very, very famous, the Charger, for being absolutely horrendous. It's an 80-ton mech that's got 5 S-lasers, which are, I mean, S-lasers are basically useless anyway. I mean, the range on them is horrific. But I suppose it matches the Charger's, like, what it wants to be doing, which is kind of getting up to physical like, hit range. So just get, right up to an opponent mech. If you do that as well, it then becomes a little bit of a, very dangerous mech. I mean, it does punching damage at 8 on each arm, and it does kick damage of 16, which is very nice. You can also, as well, you can shoot 3 out of 5 of those S-lasers. So you can't shoot the ones in the arms if you are punching, but if you are kicking, you can. So, that's where you see the damage then starting to get into a reasonable level. For an 80-ton, no, not at all. But if you go in and hit with some of those S-lasers, and you either hit with both punches or the kick, you'll probably force a piloting check on the opponent mech, as well with the punches. One really important thing, if you are playing a Charger, make sure you play quirks, because it does have a barrel fist quirk. That basically negates the modifier on the punch. So you see regularly you take a +1 to hit on a punch, which is a negative modifier. With barrel fists, that just becomes a 0 modifier, so you just roll a dice to see if you hit. That's really quite good because then you're looking at getting, you only need, it's 1 in 6 of doing a headshot with a punch. So that's great, especially when you get potentially 2 chances to do that with 2 arms. Obviously, you just have to not shoot with those 2 S lasers in the arms. So it does have some positives. I can see where the charger can become a bit of a nuisance for an opponent. Like it's not, or even doing you don't just have to go in and punch in and kick. You can, there is a move in classic BattleTech called the charge, so you can do that as a physical attack as well, which this mech would be pretty solid at. I mean, clues in the title, and it's quite a fast mech. It's got, moving on to mobility now anyway, because it's a 5'8", which when this mech was made and going up into the Succession Wars, that's I don't think you get assault mechs faster than that, so it probably is the fastest assault mechs on the books during the Succession Wars. In terms of another good thing about it, it's completely heat efficient. You can only ever build up a total of 7 heat with this mech in terms of running and shooting all the S lasers, so you'll never ever overheat with it, so that's nice. The armor on it is way too low for an assault mech. In fact, I'd go so far as to say if the armor was better on the Charger, not sure where you could have pulled anything else from really though, because the engine just takes up so much. But if the armor was better, it wouldn't be on this list. I'd see it just as a complete melee attack, a cheap melee assault mech at that point that does like 16 damage on a kick. So yeah, it's not good armor. I mean, the center torso armor is okay, but when you kind of put it into comparison with other 80 tonners, it's significantly under armored. Another quite bad design flaw is the left and the right torso. There you can see both of them house 1 S laser. That gives you very, very low options in terms of padding out any criticals. So you'll be able to take 1 crit on the right torso there, or the left torso, but if there is another crit that comes through, it's going to go right into the centre torso, and obviously a mech like this just simply cannot afford to lose its mobility, because that's the only thing it really has to rely on, or gyros, because then you kind of have problems with any potential piloting checks, anything like that. So it's a mech it's horrendously designed. Again, a bit like the Hunchback 2, it's got a little bit of a fluff reason why. It's kind of a weird experimental assault scout. It's also, I think there's lots of charges in the Draconis Combine Forces. If memory serves me correctly, they had a bit of a lack of assault mechs, so they just went and bought anything that they could, and the Charger was what was available, so that's what they got. It's seen amongst the the armed forces or the mech warriors in the Draconis Combine, it's seen as like a punishment mech, so it's where you put somebody who you don't like because it is a little bit of a slight suicide mech is the Charger. Really important to note as well, I mean, I'm only dealing with the stock variants here, which I probably should have said right off the bat, but there is eventually a version of the Charger that's got like an AC-20 in there, so they do eventually kind of spec it up and give it like a bit of a punch, but the stock variant of the Charger is pretty laughably bad. Next up, so number 8 on this list is it's the Assassin. Very much a mech I associate with the Succession Wars. This is the ASN Mark II-1. Beautiful battle value here at 749, and I think weird one. I think out of every mech on this list, it's probably the one that I'm not going to say I'd take it off because it's not a good mech, but I can see an absolute, a bit like the Charger, I can see an absolute use for this mech. And we'll deal with its positive first, and that's its incredible mobility for a Succession War era mech. So you can see it's a 7-11-7. Special emphasis on that 7 jump. That is very, very rare in Succession War mechs. So you are going to be darting all over the place. I also consider this mech to have a bit of a special move if you can pull it off, and that's to jump 1 level above an opponent mech if they are down 1 level from you. So if you can jump on a hillside next to them that's 1 level up, you can kick, and that kick then goes onto the punch table because you'll be basically kicking at the head. So you've got a 1 in 6 chance of kicking the head off a mech, which is lovely. Obviously only 8 points of damage, so most mechs will be able to take that potentially to the head, but it will absolutely decimate their armor on the head, and it will injure or potentially injure the the pilot. So that is a bit of a cheeky like special move that it can do in Succession Wars that a lot of other mechs can't, because they wouldn't ever be able to jump that far to do it. But the assassin can, because that jump is absolutely incredible. Weapon loadout is horrific. I mean, it's a 40-ton mech. It's got an LRM-5, an M-Laser, and an SRM-2. I think when I talk about the missiles on here, we'll always just assume that we're rolling a 7, because that's probably what you'll get on 2d6. So you can see that for an LRM-5, I'd assume that 3 missiles will hit, so that's 3 points of damage. For an SRM-2, we assume that 1 would hit, so that's 2 damage. So we're talking 5 plus 5. So this mech does an alpha strike of 10 damage, which is awful for a 40-tonner. But again, most of it's taken up with the the added jump jets and the speed, because obviously the engine in this assassin is very, very good. The weapons are very mismatched as well. I mean, well, the M-Laser and the SRM-2 work very well together, I suppose, even though they're very, very limited damage. But the LRM-5 is, I think it's like the worst weapon in the game. So, yeah, not a fan of that. Obviously, you then get the minimum problems there as well. So anything up to 6 hexes will take that minimum range penalty. So again, it's a mech. It's like a harasser mech, really, and it's got that one little trick up its sleeve. In terms of armor, pretty horrendous. Again, like 10 on the side torsos there for a 40-ton mech. It's not going to last very long. It's a bit paper thin. In terms of its like quirks and loadouts, actually does okay. There's all those jump jets there on the side torsos, so that's actually beneficial. That will like swallow up any crits. You do have a 1 in 5 chance though of hitting the ammo, in which case the mech will light up and there's no case, but that's standard for all Succession War era mechs. Heat efficiency is what I'd call okay. I mean, if you are going to be jumping at 7, that's 7 points of heat you're generating. Then obviously if you fire with the M-Laser, that will give you the 10, and you've got 10 single heat sinks. The most you can go up to, if you're doing that full jump, is a +4. So that's actually not too bad. So I'd call this mech actually pretty heat efficient. So that's the Assassin. A fun mech as well. Looks great. It's a really fun mech, is the Assassin to play. Next up, so number 7 on the list, we have got, drumroll please, the Banshee. The core like standard version. This is the BNC Mark III-E. Comes in at 1,422 battle value, which is pretty appalling for this mech. Maybe justified reason to say this mech should be a little bit higher on the list, but like the Charger, it does have the physical attack dimension to it, and it's quite fast, so that's the thing. Unlike the Charger as well, I suppose this is like a big advantage for it. It does have much better armour than the Charger, although it is 15 tons heavier, so it can afford to get a bit more on there. Where this mech is completely terrible, though, is in its weapon loadout. For a 95-ton mech, 1 PPC, 1 AC5, and a small laser is horrific. Partly because it wants to be a sniper mech. It kind of suffers a little bit what I call dragon syndrome. Like the dragon feels a little bit like this. It's quite a tanky mech that you'd want to get into like close proximity, and it's got an AC5 on there. Same for the Banshee, but obviously to the max, because it's a 95-ton mech. It's not a 60-ton mech. So you've kind of got here, you've got mismatched weapons. It shouldn't be a sniper. It's far too big of a boy to be a sniper. As well, if you kind of want to get in and do the physical combat, you're going to then take horrendous like minimum range penalties for the PPC and the AC5. I mean, it's coming in at a +3 on minimum range penalties, so you just mitigate all the kind of short distance penalties that you'd usually get. So it's a horrifically designed mech. Important to note, though, one of the most powerful of the like latter day Succession War mechs is a Banshee. That's the Steiner Banshee that was, I think, 3026. I want to say it's the 5E or the 5S. I can't remember. Amazing mech though. It's got an AC10, a PPC, and like 4 M-Lasers. It's like a very, very powerful mech for Succession Wars. It sacrifices the engine though, so that's just a 3.5, whereas this is a 4.6, so this gets a bit more speed, but it just gets really pathetic weapon loadout. In terms of heat, it's another really, really heat efficient. In fact, it's too heat efficient, really, but that's because of the big engine that it's got there with those extra heat sinks. I think there's one heatsink on there as well, just on randomly on the right leg, which is quite weird. So 16 heat sinks. It can only ever do a total of, what's that, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 heat. So you're always going to be running cool with it. That's positive, obviously. In terms of its design, well, there's a lot of armor on the left torso. So the AC5 and the PPC are relatively okay there. It's just they're not good enough. I mean, they work very well together in tangent, the PPC and the AC5, because they've got, exactly the same range options. And, solid 15 points of damage, just not on a 95-ton mech. Physical attacks, obviously, very, very good for this mech. And there's no weapons on the arms either, which is a slight positive, I suppose. But then you take into account both your big guns. I've got minimum range penalties, so you're only ever going to be able to do the actual, physical attacks. We're probably not going to hit with the PPC and the AC5. And that's where this mech really starts to fall down, because you're basically spending 1,422 battle value on something that can either kick or it can snipe, and it's got loads of armour. It's a very weird option. I think any day of the week I would take a Charger over this mech, just for the fact the Charger's got like a one-trick pony where you can just get in. Better speed than this mech as well, because it's a 5'8", and just try and punch the opposition to death. Try to get a headshot on there. You can do that with the Banshee as well to some extent, but again, you can't shoot any of the weaponry. You've got one S-laser where the Charger's got two, and it's nearly 500 BV less than the Banshee. So yeah, no brainer really. Next up, so number 6 now. Drum roll, is the Clint. The Clint is kind of similar to the Assassin in a lot of ways. Very fun mech to play though. It's a mech that you see straight away. The mobility is its strength. It's a 696, so it's kind of for me it's a worse Assassin because it just loses out on that extra jump jet, and it can't do as quick of a run. The armour as well on this mech is absolutely appalling. 6 points of armour on the side torsos for a 40-ton mech. I mean, that's like 20-25-ton levels of armour. It's absolutely horrific. Weapon loadouts, AC5 and 2M lasers. That is nothing to write home about. I mean, obviously, you can shoot from distance with the AC5, but then the 2M lasers are just not going to be able to make it into any kind of tank. Heat management's good. Like a lot of these mechs, it runs relatively cool. Obviously, the jump in at 6, and then plus the M lasers plus the AC5. What's that give you? 13 heat. But are you going to be using all those in the same turn? Probably not. So you get a +3 on it. So it's a pretty well designed mech when it comes to heat. You can, potentially as well. It does have a little bit of the Assassin Creed in that it can jump and do that little trick kick, but it's just not as good as the Assassin because it's only a 6 jumper as opposed to a 7. So it's like, to me, this is like an Assassin without its special ability, and it's got worse armor, so it's pretty horrific. Big thing in its advantage though is it's a 770 battle value, so it's a really cheap mech. I say an advantage. I mean, if you just had like 800 battle value hanging around and you wanted to fit another mech in there for reasons, yeah, the Clint's a solid option, especially Succession Wars era. So if you're playing that time, again, I'd go back to that point. There's no such thing really as a bad mech. Just in terms of its like design on its critical hit table there. One thing I do like about this, it's got its jump jets in its legs. That's actually very beneficial because it means if you take any leg hits, which you probably will get on the Assassin because of on the Clint because of the paper thin armor, you've got a 1 in 3 chance of hitting one of the jump jets instead of one of the actuators or the hip, which is always beneficial because as soon as you start losing your actuators or your hip, your mech basically can barely run anymore. It loses its mobility, and that's obviously terrible for a mech like the Clint. Side torsos, a little bit lacking, and obviously there's a 1 in 3 chance there of hitting the AC5 ammo, which will just completely put the mech up in smoke, so that's not great. Not much else to say really. Not a good mech at all is this is some designation as well, the CLNT Mark II, Mark 3T. That's a mouthful. So there's the Clint. Halfway there now, so number 5 on this list is the Rifleman, which I think everyone would have expected to be on here because the Rifleman is nefariously a very bad mech. Let's deal with everything though here, because I think the Rifleman is a mech that, in a way, almost becomes eclipsed by the Jaeger mech, because the Jaeger mech and the Rifleman are both pretty bad mechs. The Jaeger mech would never make this list though because of its heat efficiency. So I think, just from memory here, I think with the Jaeger mech has got two AC2s, which it swaps out for the L lasers, which at first you think that's a terrible move. I'd much prefer the L laser. You'd be wrong though, because the L lasers on this make the mech just unworkable when it comes to heat management. Whereas an AC2, two AC2s, two AC5s, and two M lasers, I think puts it up to 10 heat, which is what the Jaeger mech can sink as well. So Jaeger mech's a far better mech. You just use it as a sniper mech, stick it to the back. Just try to score like crit hits with the AC5s, the AC2s, and if anything comes close enough to you, you can try to score them with the M lasers. But that's enough of the Jaeger mech anyway. We're talking about the Rifleman, but they are very similar. The Rifleman is, the speed is, I suppose, for Succession Wars is okay. Armour is on the thin side, especially for a 60-ton mech. Not great at all, actually. Where this mech becomes, for me, though, massively troublesome, which is unusual in this list, because usually we've been talking about relatively heat-efficient mechs, is its heat efficiency is just horrific. So you can see that it's two big main guns, which are the L lasers. They do 16 heat on an Alpha Strike. Then you've got, an extra 6 heat for the M lasers, and then 2 heat for the AC5. So you couple all that together with the fact that you are walking or running, you are just generating way excessive heat on there. Even you can't shoot the two L lasers together, really. That will generate 16 heat. So you're going to be up 6 already. And then if you do that twice, you're then going to be getting into the problem areas with heat, modifiers to hit, penalties, big movement penalties. God forbid you do it 3 times in a row, because you'll be potentially hitting that AC5 ammo in the centre torso, by the way, which is actually not too bad. I'd much prefer it there than I would on the right torsos, because obviously if it was on like the right or the left torso, it'd have like a 1 in 2 chance of being hit, which would make it completely useless. At least on the centre torso, it's got a little bit more armour in there. But even then, if you're doing any crits on there, it's going into the gyro or the fusion engine, which is horrific anyway. So yeah, badly designed, really. The point there on the torsos is actually another salient one. There are only 2 M lasers padding it out, so once you get that 1 crit on there, it then any more crits on that location will just start tearing into the centre torso. So it's a mech that's kind of combines the worst of all worlds, really. It's not heat efficient. Its damage is actually okay. It's actually quite solid for a 60-tonner, but you're never going to be able to do it. You never want to get up close with this mech either. It can do a pretty hefty kick, but it doesn't have hand actuators. So therefore, look at the damage there. The damage on the punches is 3, so that's pretty horrific. Speed's not much to write home about either. there is an argument to suggest this mech should be higher, but I have a little bit of an affinity for the Rifleman, because in the latter stages of BattleTech, not latter, but as you get into the later eras, there are some really decent versions of the Rifleman. One's like with a rotary cannon AC5, if I remember rightly. Maybe not, that might be a Jaeger mech, I can't remember. But there are better versions of it, especially when you start getting double heat sinks. So, yeah, it does eventually become an okay mech, but in Succession Wars, for me, it is actually one of the worst mechs in the game. But still fun to play, just for again, you learn heat management when you play mechs like this. So, you just can't shoot if it's 2 big guns. So you have to kind of learn that optimum range that you can get in and try to kind of balance your heat management. Coming in as well, battle value's not too bad. It's just over 1,000 at 1039. That's okay. Again, if you were playing, if you had like a 1,000 battle value to take or in and around that area, it's another mech, I suppose, and it can do that sniping option with those 2 AC5s. Especially if you're playing like double hit AC5s, that can be a little bit useful on this. Next up, so number 4 in our list is the Crusader. No list of bad BattleTech mechs would be complete without the Crusader. Positives first. One massive positive for this mech: battle value of 567. Incredible. That is so cheap. That's incredible battle value. You can supplement any force with a Crusader. This is the CDA Mark II, the stock variant. Really, really quick mech, so that's the big positive in terms of the design, which is it's an 812, so in succession wars, that's very, very quick. Weapon loadout is pretty horrific. 2 M lasers and 1 S laser. All you're really going to be looking for with this mech is trying to get like rear shots or positionals or maybe objective capture, so you can get an advantage through the speed. The less said about the armor, the better. I mean, the armor on this thing is so bad. You just have to run all the time, everywhere. If you are not running, you are dying. In this mech, you are desperately needing of the target modifiers. There's very little good to say about this mech. I mean, heat management. Heat management's fine. It comes in at a total of 9 on a run and an alpha strike. And it's got 10 heat sinks, so its run's cool. Its critical hit table is horrific. Again, there's only 2 M lasers in the respective side torsos, so any crits going through, which basically, tap this thing, you'll get a crit on it because 6 armor on the side torsos, so it's absolutely brutal, really. But again, it does have its worth in terms of its mobility. You don't want to get too close to mechs. Like you don't want to be in a fighting match with this. It's got a solid kick at 8 damage, but 2 points of damage on the punches, obviously, because it's got no hand actuators. That's really, really bad. Top 3 now. So number 3 on the list it's the Crossbow. So another clan mech. We can't have this list and not have a few clan mechs in here. So here's the Crossbow. The Crossbow is a weird one. It was originally I think it was a Lyran design Star League era mech that the clans then designed a new mech around. Much like with the Archer's name, the Archer has got like the LRM packing all over its torsos. This basically packs the LRMs in its arms. It also has Artemis 4 in there, so that's in terms of weapon loadout. I mean, again, I look at, if you're talking about Alpha Strike on missiles, you have to take 7 as the medium, so that gives you 12 points of damage for each. So it's got a total of 24 damage, which for a clan mech is horrendous. Though you do get Artemis, so you do get bonuses, so that's good. And it's obviously the clan LRMs are good because there's no minimum range penalties on there, and they do go out to that 21 hexes or inches of damage. Where this mech, I think, really starts to fall down, though, is on that weapon loadout. It's just not good enough. I mean, for a 65-ton clan mech to do that little damage is really, really poor. There are far better options available to you. In terms of other features on here, I'd say armour is actually pretty solid. I mean, it's got standard armour and standard internal structure, so there's no endo steel, no fibrous armour on there or anything. The crit table is horrific for this mech because there is nothing on the left and right torso. That's absolutely brutal. So anything going through into the torsos will get directly into the engines or the fusion engine or the gyro. I suppose one crumb of comfort, it does have the fusion engine instead of the XL engine, so that gives it a little bit more hardiness, and obviously, being as they are with the clans, they've then bumped that up to a 5.8, so it's a relatively quick mech as well. All the weaponry is in the arms, which is, say that's good or bad. I suppose it's bad because your arms can get shot off relatively easily, but then they've put everything in this, like all the ammo is in there as well, and it's got K, so you're only ever going to lose the arms, so the torsos, the mech can still function therefore if you get an ammo hit. But it's just the damage on it. I think why this mech is in here is just because it's so disappointing. I mean, you'd expected another 2 or 3 weapon systems on there for a clan mech, but they decided to kind of cheap out, go with a regular fusion engine. They put none of the special armor, the special standard internal structure on there. 20 double heats, so heat is fine. Obviously, it can never run hot. It does a total of 14 heat, 20, so it's a completely cool running mech. I can see the advantages of playing this purely as like an indirect fire mech, so you just keep it out of the way. Or you can actually keep it on like a hill because it's got solid armour for its tonnage, and just crit seek and try to shave off some armour of the opposition. So, I mean, again, it's all relative, right? So is this mech better than the Crusader? Yeah, of course it is, but it's because it comes in as well. Remember, battle value on this thing is 1,829, which is horrific. It's very expensive. That's probably because of the Artemis 4 systems. So you're paying like, you know, a ton of battle value for something that you can just go and get an LRM carrier to do a far better job, and they're far cheaper. So yeah, it's a horrendously disappointing mech. Looks cool though, like the new sculpt on it that Catalyst have done is very good as well, and I've got several of them, and they're fun to play because, you know, it's kind of it's a very, very poor man's Archer really, but because it's a clan mech, it really stands out. You don't expect this level of poorness from the clan design. Anyway, right into the thick of it now. So number 2 on our list is the Gargoyle, the man of war to those Inner Sphere players amongst you. I've got to say, even though this is on this list because it is absolute garbage mech, I love this mech. I love how it looks. I love the fact that it's so derpy. I love the fact that it's a clan omni-mech that is just horrendously designed. Like the Crossbow, but worse, I'd say, this one. So let's deal with this, you know, step by step. The first point to note is the battle value on this mech is actually really quite nice. It's 1,537. It's a clan Omni assault mech at 1,537 battle value. That is a novelty. So if you are kind of operating on a budget as a clan player, the Gargoyle is a really, really solid option. It's a relatively quick mech, so it's a 5.8 for an assault mech, obviously. I'd say it's an assault mech that you can use as like a battle armored delivery system. So that's something to be aware of, especially because all its weaponry are in its arms, so you can bring the elementals on the side torsos. Absolutely fine. It's not like you have to stop firing a side torso weapon because the elemental is there. So it can be used as that, just as a bit of a novelty as an assault mech. Where this mech is absolute garbage though is just in its weapon loadout. It's so weird. I mean, you've got here. You've got an ERS laser, which I actually think the ERS laser is the obviously it's pretty solid as a a small laser system because its range is a 246 and it does 5 points of damage. So that's actually pretty good. 2 SRM6s, so they didn't even bother giving it the streak upgrade. They just stuck on regular SRM6s, and then bizarrely 2 LB5Xs on the arms as well. Now, I love LBX weaponry. It's beautiful. But the LBX5 is not great. I mean, it's kind of similar to like the AC5 or the AC2. They're always a little bit disappointing. But on a clan assault mech with that little level of like damage output is really, really interesting to see. I mean, I suppose what you'd look at this mech as is purely as a crit seeker with the SRM6s and the LB5s. But you just would... It's just bizarre. That's why I love it. I do actually love this mech, just because of the battle value, because it's cheap, and it's such a novelty and a weird mech. Its heat management is just insane, like far too heat efficient, but that's because it's got a good engine. So it does 30 points of heat sinking, and it can only ever generate a maximum of 4, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 heat. So it runs colder than ice, this mech. Which is, for me, that sounds great, but it's not really, because all that tonnage that they've put in, which obviously gives you the extra speed on the mech, but all that tonnage is basically lost for nothing. So you could have put more armor on there. You could have just like downgraded this to a 4.6 and made it into a completely viable mech, put better weaponry on there, but they went with the SRM6s and the LB5Xs. Again, though, I think that its strength is that in its speed, it can deliver elementals and it can crit seek for you. But it's just because it's an assault clan mech and it's pathetic in terms of its damage output. Let's have a look at the damage output. So we'd say on an SRM6, we've got an average of 4 missiles hitting, so that's 8 points of damage times 2. That's 16. And then with the LB5s, that's 3. So yeah, you're talking like what, like I don't know, it's like 25 points of damage or somewhere thereabouts for an assault clan mech. It's just horrendous. It's also ammoed up to the hilt, so that's not good, obviously, especially if you're playing withdrawal rules. So you've got a 1 in 2 chance of blowing up the ammo if you get into the side torsos. That's absolutely brutal. It is cased, but then you lose. I mean, again, force withdrawal, you're going to have to retreat anyway, and you lose half the weapon systems because the arms will come off regardless of case. It just won't destroy the engine or the mech warrior. Oh yeah, it's brilliantly terrible, this mech. It's a real achievement, actually. It's just like, again, the novelty of the crossbow just being so bad when it's a clan Omni. Now, drum roll, please. The worst, or my worst mech in classic BattleTech is the quick draw. Round of applause for the quick draw. I actually love, again, much like the Gargoyle, I love this mech. I like playing it on tabletop. I am super excited to get the new sculpt to this in the next Kickstarter. Positives first, right? It's a 585, so for a 60-ton mech, it's insanely quick. You know, for a Succession Warrior mech, 585, fantastic. The problem is with it though, one, the battle value. So its battle value comes in at 1192, which is massively overpriced. That's because of the size of the engine, presumably. Weapon loadouts. So the problem that I have with the quick draw, and this is relevant in quite a few mechs, although I think it's the only time I've had it on this list here, is it puts two of its like really quite important weapons, given it's not got great weapon systems. Two of the M lasers are in the rear. And it's a mech that's quick. So why on earth does it need like rear weaponry, right? Like, it's not like, you know, I understand it from a 3-5 assault mech, where you must have, you know, if anything gets into your rear arc, it can be problematic. So you either want, you know, the mech that can reverse its weaponry and shoot behind it, or you want some rear weaponry just to kind of dissuade anyone trying to do rear shots. You don't need it in the quick draw. So straight away it loses 10 points of its damage. So on an alpha strike with this, again, we'll do that average on the LRMs and the SRMs. So we've got 6 plus 3, that's 9, plus 10 for the medium lasers. That's 19 damage on a 16-ton mech, which is just awful. I suppose it's pretty decent in physical combat. I mean, it kind of takes on the assassin and the Clint's thesis that you can potentially, it's not as good obviously, it's only a 5 jump, but if you can get that one tier up, you then do 12 points of damage on a kick, which will actually kill most mechs in the game. So that's one positive you can get. But I'd say if you're playing against anyone who knows how to play BattleTech, they'll know that with a quick draw, and they just won't put their mechs near any hills. In fear of you doing that, like running up and then jumping, or them forgetting about it and letting you get potentially do 1 in 6 chance to like headshot the mech on a kick. But I think it's, again, it goes like the other two clan mechs that I was just talking about. It's just massive disappointment with this mech. It's because it is a 60-tonner. It's got a cool name. It's quick, and it's just with a little bit of rejigging, the weaponry would have been okay. Instead, what you have is you have a 60-ton mech that can kind of do a little bit of sniping with an LRM-10, which is fine, but again, for a 60-ton mech, you want more than that. And then you get up close, and you're doing that potential of what you've only got 2 M lasers and SRM-4, and then your LRM takes minimum range penalties very, very quickly. Punches aren't great either. It only does 6 damage, which is, well, I mean, that's just standard for a 60-ton mech, so that is what it is. So you're going in for kicks, really, which is 12 damage, which is nice. Just in terms of its like loadout, its critical hit table, sorry. It actually does okay here. It's got some like padding out on the torsos. You've got a 1 in 5 chance hit of the ammo, so that's actually not too bad for Succession War era mechs. 13 heat sinking. That's actually not too. If you discount the fact that the rear medium lasers aren't going to shoot. So you've got 4, 7, 10, 13 plus 5. So you come in at 18 on a full jump and a forward-facing alpha strike. So that's a plus 5. That's actually not too bad. Again, I think if you're kind of looking at this list and you really wanted to pick it apart, you would probably say that some of the mechs further up are worse than the quick draw. But I'm so disappointed by it because it's got features in there that could be fixed so easy. I mean, spin those M lasers round. You've actually got a not so bad mech then. You know, that's 4 M lasers is pretty solid. Another major drawback to it, obviously, they've sacrificed a lot of armor on the mech, so it's coming in at like 14 points of armor on the side torsos, not great. Although you are going to be picking up pretty solid target movement modifiers, but yeah, it's a mech that I tell you why as well. I've played with the quick draw quite a bit on tabletop, and it never ever performs. I don't know why. I just can't get it to work. I'll put it to you like this, like the Shadowhawk, which is a always kind of seen as a terrible mech in BattleTech, which I actually disagree with. I think the Shadowhawk's actually not too bad at all, especially in Succession Wars. It basically does everything okay or poorly, but that can be all right in Succession Wars. But I've had success with the Shadowhawk. I don't know why. It shouldn't really work. It's a 55-ton mech, but it's got, the standard version's got pretty decent armor. The quick draw, though, whatever I do with it, and I've played it multiple times on tabletop, I just can't do anything with it. It's just constantly it just feels like it's filling up space, which is quite unusual. I think out of every other mech on here, I'd say that it does have a purpose. It can do something, but it's any kind of special little trick it has. Like if it had if it was a jump 7 and they just completely sacrificed all the armor for that or whatever, that wouldn't be too bad. You could potentially then do that little trick shot with a kick to the head, but you can't do that with just a 5. It's much more difficult to do. It then just again, it's got things in place where with those 2 rear shot M lasers which just kill its damage output, and you're just like, why have you done that? But I will still persist to play this mech because I do love it and it is very, very fun to play. Anyway, that's it. That's my top 10 hate list. No, not hate list at all. That's my actually go and play these mechs because they're really fun. But they are a bit of a trash fire. I thought it pretty pertinent to do this now as well because a lot of these mechs that I've gone through here we're actually getting in the next Kickstarter. The quick draw certainly in that. What the Assassin, the Crusader, the Charger, they're all coming in the next Kickstarter. Some are already here. I think all the clan mechs that I've shown, so that's Hunchback 2, C, the Gargoyle and the Crossbow, they all exist already, but this next wave or this next Kickstarter wave is really going to be a mop-up session, I think, for the mechs that are very popular but are pretty bad. I think the Clint's in there as well, actually, so thought it'd be a good time to do this just to kind of put a bit of buzz around those old derpy mechs that we all know and love, and they add so much colour and value to BattleTech. So there you are. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Comment below. I hate saying stuff like that. It's so crass. But yeah, I am interested in what other people's worst mechs are. So do tell me about that below. I'm not attention seeking on YouTube. I'm not that kind of person. I just like speaking to the community. So if you've got mechs in there that you feel like I've left out, or mechs that you just think are absolutely garbage, interested to hear what you think. In fact, I'd like that because I do like playing terrible mechs, especially if you can get ones in at a decent battle value. It's like the Crusader. The Crusader is so cheap. It's got value because of how cheap it is. Like just getting a mech on the table, and with Crusader specifically, you can hunt in packs with them. Having 4 Crusaders, that's 8 M lasers. They all kick. They can all get up close because they're very, very fast. So they can get up and do kicking damage and shoot those M lasers. So there is, you can make these things work for you if you get a little bit creative. Anyway, I'll leave it on that note. So I will thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you again next time.